Bob. How you doing? Pretty good. Pretty good. Glad to hear that.
This is Robert Durst on a prison phone call. It's 2001. He's been arrested for the murder and dismemberment of his neighbor Morris Black, and he's reaching out to his longtime friend and sometime lawyer, Stewart Altman, because Bob needs some help.
I am interested in Belize. Without mentioning my name, tell them you represent somebody who is an economic citizen of Belize. Economic citizen, I never even heard that term before.
Bob wants to put some money offshore, but Stewart is wild about the idea.
No, but this thing with Belize, that just scares me about having me get involved with it. You know what I'm saying? Jake, if you don't want to do it, don't do it. This is something he says that you should have your people do directly, like you or, Deborah called them directly.
A few days later, Bob brings this up with his wife, Deborah Sheridan.
The man's name from Belize, did you ever call him?
No, I'm not doing that. I'm not touching it.
Bob explained to Debbie that he'd spoken to numerous people about this, and no one wanted anything to do with it.
Well, it says something, doesn't it?
No, it says I haven't reached the right people yet.
Hi, I'm Stuart-Pontier, one of the filmmakers behind HBO's The Jinx. Welcome back to the official Jinx podcast, a show where we take you behind the scenes of Andrew Jarecki's documentary series that became a real-life murder investigation. Chapter 10, The Unluckiest Man in the World, was just released on Max. The prosecution expected Robert Durst's murder trial would hinge on handwriting, but that changed after a bombshell witness placed Bob in LA during Susan Berman's murder. Today on the podcast, we unpack Bob's relationship with his oldest friends, the Altmans, and we go behind the scenes on Emily Altman's testimony, because the next day, she actually tried to walk it all back.
Can people hear? Can they hear what we're saying out there?
Yeah.
Can you guys hear what we're saying?
After Andrew and I settled into the studio, we started talking through Bob Durst and Stuart Altman's longtime friendship.
Bob became friends with Stuart when they were in school. And obviously Stuart was a charming guy and was an athlete. And Bob was sort of, I think, relatively undistinguished, you know. The only thing I really know Bob did in high school was he was like a camp counselor for a while. And I knew somebody that was one of the kids that he was the counselor for. And I think they said he was kind of maybe not the most responsible camp counselor. You could imagine him being, you want me to roll those joints for you kids? Stuart and Bob were like knocking around New York. And I guess Stuart had run across Kathy somehow. And he thought, oh, this girl's attractive and impressionable. And she could probably be a good person for me to introduce my buddy Bob to. Stuart was at a party, and Kathy comes with her friend, Cheryl Catronbone.
When I met Kathy at my dad's cousin's dentist office where we both worked, she actually trained me.
Cheryl Catronbone met Kathy Durst when they were both teenagers working as dental hygienists. Here she is talking with Andrew in an unreleased interview for part 1 of The Jinx.
So how old were you guys when you first moved into the city?
So when we first moved into the city, Kathy had turned 19 in June, and I was turning 18 in August.
Cheryl and Kathy settled into their small apartment in Midtown Manhattan, and they started meeting their neighbors. One of them was Stuart Altman.
Stuart lived in our building. He lived 1 or 2 floors up. You know, he was young and good looking and friendly, and like on the way up, like he'd knock on the door. So like, are you guys home? You know, going upstairs, come upstairs if you want. So he was really our only friend in the building. And he introduced me one day to Bobby.
Here's Bob telling Andrew his side of the story in an outtake from their first interview.
I first met Kathy at a party that my friend Stuart Altman took her to. Stuart's very outgoing. Yeah, he came to the party with these 2 ladies.
And then you had your sort of first date?
Yes, 2 days later we went out.
And did the relationship sort of pick up fairly quickly?
Yes. We went after dinner, went home and made love.
On the first date?
Well, we'd had whatever you want to call when we met. I mean, when we were met at the party, we hung out together the whole time.
Bob says that he and Kathy hit it off. Cheryl, on the other hand, was not impressed.
There was just something about him that made my skin crawl. It's just like, you know, when your hair just stands up?
I think similarly, when they were at UCLA, Stuart was visiting Bob the weekend he met Susan.
I invited friends of mine out from back here, Stuart Altman and his brother.
Bob was in grad school at UCLA, and Stuart would come out from time to visit.
And the place that people would go was the Dykstra dormitory. Everybody goes to the big pool in the afternoon, and I saw this girl wearing a white outfit and a white cap and black hair, and I went over and started talking to her. And that was Susan Berman.
So Stuart Altman was with Bob when he met both Kathy McCormick and Susan Berman. He's right in the middle of this story. So obviously, Andrew tried to interview him.
Hey, Stuart?
Yeah.
Hey, it's Andrew Jarecki.
Hello, Andrew.
How are you?
Okay, what's up?
So I wanted to touch base because I've been, we were trying to schedule a time to come and see you guys and talk about Bob.
Right now, I just can't even think about doing it.
They must have known that Bob was pushing his luck by being in a whole show about Bob. You know, the things that they had done before were like these kind of news magazine-y shows, like 48 Hours.
Andrew, when I did that thing for 48 Hours, I did it really because Bob was in jail, and we were trying to make a better image for him.
You'll never get Bob Durst's old friends, the Altmans, to believe Durst is capable of murder.
He's just a regular guy who happens to have a lot of money. And I don't see why people should hold that against him.
Would you describe Bob as one of your best friends?
Yes, I would. I've known him longer than anybody else around, that's for sure.
But when I contacted them and they knew that I'd been working for a long time on a story about Bob and that I wanted to go to their house or their law office and have a real conversation with them, I think they got cold feet.
It's a project you're doing I just don't want to do right now.
John Lewin and the prosecution team also had a hard time getting Stuart to talk. After Bob's arrest in 2015, Bob's lawyers tried to keep the Altmans from testifying.
They all say, well, Stuart was obviously Bob's attorney, and therefore their conversation should be protected. And I think Judge Wyndham's attitude is like, well, if they're talking about stuff that's not legal stuff, like, I can't give that to you. You know, you can say that if they were talking about Bob's strategy of how to get out of trouble or something like that, that would be fair. And I think it's such a great illustration of that they're there like pounding through the TV guide, trying to figure out what Bob should watch on the jailhouse TV.
8 o'clock on Channel 2, Survivor. 9 o'clock, CSI, which is Crime Scene Investigation. I like that. I do too. 10 o'clock, The Agency. So I like that too. Okay. 7, Whose Line Is It Anyway, and Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? Hate it. Okay. Okay, now A.
He likes the crime shows. He likes like CSI, and he hates Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. He doesn't really like comedies.
2002 TVF.
I also love the way where Stuart was like, I don't like that. And he's like, I don't like it. If you don't like it, I don't like it.
USA. USA is Sean Connery in The Rock. Oh, the guys in my cell love that. We slam bang. I don't want to see it.
Ultimately, Stuart would be called to testify. And it would get pretty spicy between him and prosecutor John Lewin. Here's some more of the back and forth, not featured in the TV show.
Did you offer to do anything to try to find Kathy?
No.
Why?
Yes, I didn't want to.
Why was that?
I didn't think it would help. If there was something I thought that you needed that I could help with, I would have.
You're a lawyer who has connections and experience in criminal matters, even at that point in time. And you're telling me you didn't say to Bob, listen, Bob, what can I do to help? What can we do to try to find Kathy?
Right.
Did he sound concerned?
No.
Did that seem strange to you?
Yes.
And you could tell, he's very careful on the witness stand about parsing exactly what he's saying.
But it wasn't Stuart who'd give the most damning testimony. It was his wife, Emily. She was also close to Bob.
Now and then I start lusting for booze and marijuana.
So do we all, but that's not it.
I look back on this whole thing, and when Stewart had gone straight, I had gone straight, none of this would have happened.
I know.
I thought about it way back when, and I thought, well, Stewart was doing with it, and I'm thinking, shit, if he can do it, I can do it.
Ain't that the truth?
Yeah.
Emily ends up playing an enormous role in the trial, somewhat unwittingly.
I mean, Emily, I think she sort of got dragged into this, She's not a sophisticated lawyer. She's in Stuart's office. She kind of answers the phone and does the books. And I've been in their office. It's really an office. It's him in a room with a desk and then a little doorway, and her in a tiny room with a desk and a doorway to the hall.
Okay, now stand up and walk back as far as you can go so I can see all of you. Just let the phone hang.
Okay.
Well, you look good. You look sexy.
Okay.
I think one of the things that people will remember is that moment where Bob and Emily have a jail visit and he says that she looks sexy.
Does Stuart know that you look sexy?
No, but thank you. We've been married too long for that. You know that.
What did you make of that?
It's a key to Bob's charm, right? There is sex appeal, weirdly, in Bob. Not at the end, but, when we first meet Bob, he's kind of this gentleman, silver-haired guy with a beautiful cashmere sweater. He sort of got this vibe. I think Emily succumbed to that in some way. I mean, I don't think they really had like a deep, hard flirtation the whole time. There's no question that when Emily comes to see Bob, he wants to let her know that he finds her appealing and he wants to make her feel young again and cool, and it probably works on her.
Eventually, Lewin gets Emily on the stand.
As you sit here today, do you have knowledge of where Robert Durst was at the time of Susan Bergen's murder? I asked her in essence, isn't it true that Bob Durst told you that he was in Los Angeles at the time of the murder? And her response to that question was,
It's hard to hear, but Emily says, I wish I could remember.
and I'm listening to that answer, and it's like the world slows down. And I have time to say to myself, oh my God, she just gave it to me. Because if she didn't know anything about Bob being in LA, instead of saying, I wish I could remember, Emily would have simply answered, no. And so I kept pushing and pushing and pushing. Did Bob Durst ever tell you, in the course of your relationship as friends, that he was in Los Angeles at the time of Susan Berman's murder?
I think he said he was in Los Angeles, at some time, but I don't remember him specifically saying he was there when Susie Berman was murdered.
Did he mention a hotel or what he was doing here?
I think he mentioned Beverly Hilton.
So he told you that he was staying at the Beverly Hilton in Los Angeles at the time Susan Berman was murdered. Is that correct?
Yes.
Ma'am, are you aware, as you sit here today, that Mr. Durst has never admitted to investigators or to the media that he was in Los Angeles in December of 2000? Are you aware of that?
No, I'm not.
That's where Emily's testimony ends in the TV show. But there's a little more to the story, because the next day, she gets back on the stand, and with defense attorney Dick DeGuerin's help, she tries to walk it back.
Let me ask you this. Do you sometimes mix up what you've heard from Stuart with what you've heard from other people and what you may have read in the newspaper?
It's entirely possible.
Have you done that with what you think you've heard from Bob?
It's entirely possible.
So that, is it possible that what you've related as hearing from Bob, you actually heard from Stuart?
It's possible.
Emily's being led by DeGuerin on cross-examination to basically say, yes, I don't think I heard it from Bob. I think I heard it from Stuart. Now, the idea was, apparently, I guess the defense thought that if Emily testified to that, not only would that explain, oh, you didn't hear it from Bob, you heard it from Stuart, but that because of some privilege, that would mean that her earlier statements you heard from Bob would somehow go away.
And so, some of the things that you've heard from Stuart is what he's heard from Bob in his attorney-client relationship, correct?
Yes.
So, the bottom line, what you told Mr. Lewin yesterday about Bob being in Los Angeles, can you say that you heard that from Bob, or may have heard it from Stuart? Or do you know?
Sitting here right now, I wish I could.
Then, prosecutor John Lewin gets a chance to redirect and dig in on Emily's story.
You said that on Wednesday. Within a very short period of time, you related to us that Bob Durst had called you during the conversation and said he was in Beverly Hills at the Beverly Hills Hilton. So my question to you is, how come on Wednesday your statement came out in parts instead of you simply telling us from the beginning, this is what Bob Durst told me? Can you explain that?
Yes.
Please.
You're asking me to remember things that happened 16, 17 years ago. And I was really trying to answer you. And you're really intimidating. You are. Let's just, be honest about that. And you're also scary. And I was really, really trying to answer you. And when I thought about it, I answered you incorrectly. I really did. Did I make a mistake? Yes. Was it wrong of me? Yes. I should have just said I don't remember. He ended it at that. But I didn't because I was dumb.
They tell you at the end of the day, don't talk to anyone about your testimony. But that's exactly what she does. And so the next day she comes in and she says, oh, by the way, I actually don't think, what I really think is that I'd heard that from Stuart.
So, have you been provided, or are you in any way familiar with your wife's conditional examination testimony?
No.
Have you discussed it with your wife?
That's a
rule. John Lewin questions Stuart Altman on the stand about whether he had talked to his wife Emily about her testimony.
I want to know everything that was discussed between you and your wife during that phone conversation that pertained to her conditional examination testimony in this case.
She was confused about time frames. She was confused about time frames. You would ask her about when and if who told her when she heard information that Mr. Durst was in Los Angeles prior to or at the time of Susan Berman's death.
Do you remember any words at all that she related during the conversation?
She was hysterical. She was crying. She was very upset. And she said to me, I'm so mixed up, I don't know. I think I made a mistake. I told Mr. Lewin that Bob was in Los Angeles. I told him that I found that out in 2000, year 2000, in December. And I said to her, it couldn't have happened like that.
Were you concerned that potentially that was going to be influencing a witness who was still in the middle of her testimony?
I didn't think of that, no.
So you're a lawyer for 50 years almost, and you're talking to a witness in the middle of their testimony, telling them you're wrong about what you testified to. Is that correct?
Correct.
But it did not occur to you that in saying that you were potentially affecting that witness's testimony.
Correct.
That night, Bob expressed his frustration with the Altmans to his wife, Debbie.
They are stupid. There is no doubt about it. Between the two of them, they were very stupid.
Yeah.
Stupid squared or something like that. All these babbling, idiotic things that Emily said, she brought them up all by herself. Emily volunteered all this stuff.
Right.
Because she's stupid.
Yeah.
What they came up with doesn't make any sense because even if she had heard it from Stuart, it sort of was, they were trying to say, well, you should disregard that information because it's a retroactively attorney-client privilege.
They were just trying to weaken it. Whatever they could do to weaken it, because what she had said was so damaging.
But what they did was just draw a massive, exclamation point on this really bad fact for them.
At this point, Bob's defense shifted away from attacking the cadaver note handwriting analysis and disputing he was in Los Angeles. Here's Andrew talking to lead defense attorney Dick DeGuerin.
Did Emily's testimony change or alter the course of the trial?
Well, I think that goes into our internal discussions, and I'm not going to talk about those. But those decisions are, as far as they were public, that's our position. I'm not comfortable with talking about who took what position or not.
Yeah, and I don't really need to know what was happening in the internal deliberations. I just know, it just seemed to me from the outside that was one of those situations where you must have learned something from Emily Altman, from your conversation, whatever, that was going to cause your client to admit to having been in the room with the dead body.
What's the question?
Wasn't that a big deal?
It was a big deal as far as the public was concerned.
I think at a certain point they were sort of like, okay, well, this is not going to pass the red face test. You had Emily admitting that Bob had told her that he was in L.A. at the time of the murder. So I think that drove them to have to make the difficult decision that they were going to have Bob take ownership of the cadaver note.
I think when we first found out that they were going to admit to writing the note, we discussed whether they were doing a Galveston again.
So, Andrew, what happened today?
Yeah. I mean, I just got this text message containing a story from the New York Times about how Bob Durst appears in a recent filing at Christmas time, quietly, without any big announcements, to admit writing the cadaver note.
Fucking crazy.
I mean, This is a very bizarre situation.
Wild.
Obviously, that dream team has done a lot of strategizing, and they've concluded that their best path is for him now to take ownership of the cadaver note and to say something like that he found her already dead, and that was how he decided to deal with a humane method of telling the police that his friend's body was there.
Such a hard sell, though, right? Because then why did you fly into San Francisco? If you were going to visit your friend in L.A., don't they have an airport there?
Yeah, they have lots of airports in LA now. I mean, back in the day. If they go with this, then the jury's got to believe that Bob is truly the unluckiest man in the world. Because now those lawyers have to stand in front of the jury and say, the same guy who is unlucky enough to be present when Morris Black was accidentally felled by a bullet, and then with a heavy heart had to cut up the body, is also the guy who 7 months earlier happened to have walked in on his murdered best friend and then had to take the covert action of telling the police, again, so he wouldn't be unfairly suspected of killing her.
Yeah, it's a tough sell. That's a tough sell, I think.
It's very, very hard to get out of that room. Once you've admitted that you're in the room with the dead person, it's going to be hard to say you didn't have anything to do with killing him.
We also knew that meant, right, he was going to testify.
I never totally understood that, but it's definitely clear that, they were going to have to sell that. And then the trial was going to hinge largely on Bob's salesmanship.
Would Bob be able to sell a brand new story on the stand? And what would that story be?
I got the idea of sending a letter to the Beverly Hills police that Susan was dead in her house.
What did you put on the envelope?
Beverly Hills police.
And on the inside, on the note?
Cadaver.
Did you lie about it for years?
Yes.
That's next time on the official Jinx podcast. The official Jinx podcast is hosted by me, Zach Stuart-Pontier. It's produced by ZSP Media and Hit the Ground Running Films with HBO. Watch episodes of The Jinx and stream The Jinx Part 2 on Max. This episode was produced by Ramoy Phillip. The rest of our team is Laura Newcomb, Ethan Oberman, and Naomi Bronner. The supervising producer is Liz Stiles. Mixing and engineering by Zach Schmidt. It was recorded by Brett Tubin at Relic Room in New York City. Music by the Mondo Boys, Wes Dillon Thornton, and John Cusiak. Additional music courtesy of HBO. The executive producers are Andrew Jarecki and me, Zach Stuart-Pontier. Special thanks to Michael Gluckstadt, Ali Cohen, Aaron Kelly, and Savon Slater at HBO Podcasts. And the fabulous Jinx team. Sam Neve, Kyle Martin, Richard Henkin, Charlotte Kaufman, Susan Lazarus, Annabelle White, Pedro Vital, Jesse Herman, Michaela Zabarfian, and Nako Narder. And thanks to Ro Dillon, George Vogel, Charlie Wessler, Nancy Jarecki, and Emily Wiedemann. And you, thanks for listening. And you made it all the way through the credits again. As a little treat, here's some more film reviews from Bob and Stuart.
How on TNT? TNT is at 9 o'clock. Starts Monday Night Mayhem. Howard Cosell. Oh, that sounds good. That's supposed to be good. It's a new movie. Frank Gifford, Howard Cosell. No, it's not a new movie. It's an old movie. Frank Gifford, Howard Cosell, Don Meredith provide play-by-play football commentary. I'd probably rather watch football than watch that, right?